to hate getting my hair cut. You know, when they lay you back in the chair and the hairstylist shampoos and conditions your hair and then cuts it to look really nice? Yeah, so that used to make me cry. Like, a lot. Every time. Now, most people might imagine a toddler having a temper tantrum. The reality, however, was that this experience lasted into my early 20s, until I finally found Janelle, a hairstylist who intuitively knew what to do with me. Why did I cry? I had no idea. It was just one of these quirks. One of so many quirks. In fact, there seem to be so many things that appear to be so easy for everyone else, and yet for me, were a struggle on the good days, and sometimes felt impossible. These were things like brushing teeth, taking a shower, reading and writing, leaving the house, having a simple conversation where I can look someone in the eye as I am talking to them, where they wouldn't find what I was saying as strange or didn't hear an ulterior motive when I was simply seeking clarity. All of these things combined for this excessive need to consistently understand what is expected of me and what was considered inappropriate. So my life has turned into this constant tweaking and adjusting, generally followed by a breakdown, all for the sake of hiding these quirks of mine. Oh, and I was good. I was so good at hiding the fact that it took nearly 3.5 decades to uncover the fact that I have autism, otherwise known as ASD. For those of you taking notes, that's Autism Spectrum Disorder, ASD. Now, since receiving my diagnosis, I found out that my story, it is not unique. It is one of so many girls and women who may be knowingly or unknowingly masking their autism. In fact, historically, researchers studying autism simply could not find enough girls to participate in the research studies. And so for a while, people believed it was mostly a guy thing. Thankfully, there has been a push to understand this gap between male and female autism and to help us uncover what's really going on. What gap, you ask? Well, let me show you. Depending on the research source, today, you can find ratios of males believed to have autism to females with the same diagnosis ranging from 16:1, meaning 1 female for every 16 males, to 2:1, meaning 1 female for every 2 males. So I went ahead and I did some math. According to the CDC, in 2024, in the United States, 4,357,667 male adults were believed to have autism. Now, stay with me. Here's my math. If we use that number as a base, and we apply it to the ratios of males to females believed to have autism, the difference in the range, when just applied to the United States, and that's between the 16:1 and the 2:1 ratios, would be so wide that that gap would equate to nearly 2 million women who could be falling through the cracks. 2 million, and that's just in the United States. That is an enormous gap. But why are we missing any females with autism? Well, one reason is what is called masking. This is when behaviors, challenges, and lack of understanding get hidden or masked to act in a more acceptable manner. This can look like either vigilance and constant adaptation to the perceived expectations of the people around you, or controlling and adjusting how others perceive how you are showing up in either the given moment or over time. Sound familiar? Yeah. Now, most of us can relate to some form of masking in our lives. With autism, however, this is taken to a completely different level and can apply to most things at most times. And although it's uncertain how many people are hiding their traits and tendencies for autism, we do know based on research that girls and women are much more likely to hide their differences. This can be done for many different reasons, stemming from the need of being accepted, being able to fit in this crazy world, being a woman or a girl, and all of the expectations we hold us to, keeping up at school, keeping a job, not making others uncomfortable or not standing out, and for some, it can be a question of safety. Now, that is a lot of masking. And let me tell you, masking is not the only thing that keeps us in that little gap. I seem to have this constant obsessive behavior where everything was a black and white approach to my passions. The way I would describe it is, when most people have a dial, I had an on and off switch. Either I do something or I don't. Research has given this trait a name. It is called autistic intensity. This means that there might not be anything unusual about the interest itself, yet it is taken to a completely different level and is very, very intense. So for me, this looked like taking 21 credits per semester, when the standard for a full-time student in the United States is 12 to 18 credits. Oh, and that is while holding 5 part-time jobs. Yeah, when it came down to my interests, I fell in love with dancing, which turned into 20 hours a week consistently. That's like another part-time job. And don't even get me started on relationships. And of course, all of this was, well managed. Until it really wasn't. And like clockwork, everything would fall apart over and over again. The social anxiety, the overstimulation, the dyslexia, the struggling to express my needs or even understanding what those needs are, having too much on my plate, being able to try to keep it all together. Oh, and the actual load I would continuously put on myself over and over again. So, like clockwork, masks came flying off and everything would fall apart. Absence from school, from the regular panic attacks and struggling with homework, made it so that it was pretty difficult to keep up. Having to walk away from dance because I worked my legs to the point of break and had to be on crutches for 4 months because of a torn meniscus. Job after job lost, partner after partner walking away because the real me was falling apart behind the masks and I didn't even understand why. I remember my first business that I ramped up so hard that after my most successful year, I actually ended up in the hospital. I had an emergency surgery and my body gave out, literally. Parts of me shut down over the course of 2 years where I lost the ability to walk, use my hands, mentally function, and a lovely array of other neurological issues. All of this while not having any idea why any of this is happening to me, why I'm like this, feeling like there's something wrong with me. Turns out, there's a name for all this. It's called autistic fatigue and autistic burnout. Now, most of us, again, experience fatigue and burnout sometimes, right? Just show of hands. Right? Yes. With autism, however, both can be experienced to a much higher level and can happen fairly frequently. And so when the autistic fatigue and the autistic burnout is combined with masking and the autistic intensity, this creates a situation that makes it very, very hard to function on a regular basis. And those weren't the only obstacles that stood in the way. On my journey to discover that I had autism, I actually had to go through a pretty long process of mental health healing through severe PTSD, anxiety, and depression. It took about 10 years in therapy when I started recognizing that some of the symptoms that I had didn't seem to match anything that was previously assigned from other diagnoses, which allowed me to ask more questions, and that allowed me to seek out a preliminary assessment, which then led to me doing a lot of research, and finally finding somebody who does adult autism diagnostics. Finding out that I had autism was so confusing, and yet made all the sense in the world. It was both freeing and challenging to understand that we have been masking so many of the symptoms and not addressing the core cause of my mental health struggles. Turns out this too has a term. Science refers to this as overshadowing. In fact, Forbes magazine has published an article that's called "Is Autism Different in Girls?", where it talks about this phenomena when doctors and teachers would see an autistic trait but would identify it as something that belonged to a previously assigned diagnosis. And in this fashion, the other diagnosis would overshadow the autistic trait and the fact that that's where it could be stemming from. So this means that we have to be extra vigilant in seeking out the answers that we need for ourselves and our loved ones. And I understand, getting the answers can be kind of scary. There are a lot of the what-ifs that come up in the process. As an adult, the things that come to mind are, what if someone had seen this sooner? What if somebody would have seen me? What if somebody would have noticed? How my life would have looked if someone had seen it? What would that mean for my understanding of myself, of the world around me, and that who I was different, and that was okay? So, the second hardest thing was the unintentional response of some of the closest people to me. Now, again, being diagnosed as an adult means that the people in your life have known you for a lifetime. They've gotten to know you as the real you that they've gotten to know. And so something like this, where they're seeing in a different light, can be rather challenging. Now, some people responded with a lot of understanding and validation. Other people had a harder time with this information. I won't go into details of what was said because I know there was no malicious intent. The reality, however, was it was very tough to feel like I had to justify, explain, or compare myself with their understanding of what autism looks like. Now, there's no fault in what we've been previously taught. There is, however, a necessity for us to change things moving forward. That means that family, loved ones, friends, doctors, teachers, counselors, educators, we need to change and recognize where we have biases, especially when it comes to girls and women with autism. We need to widen our understanding of the vast autism spectrum. We need to invest into studies specifically around women and girls with autism, and to be able to equip our teachers and our doctors with updated tools to watch for early signs. We also need to change how we talk about autism. It is not a disease, and there's something wrong with the individual or with the situation, nothing that needs to be changed. It is a superpower. And when you understand it, when you accept it, when you can step into it and see it as more than just a quirk, you can have an extraordinary individual in front of you. All you need to do is you need to look past it and have those conversations. One of the first people that I told after I got my diagnosis was my hairstylist, Janelle, who I've been seeing now for almost 10 years. Now, for those of you who don't remember, that was Janelle, the hairstylist from the beginning of the story. Yeah? Okay, cool, just making sure. So, in having this conversation with her, talking to her about the diagnostic process and the discoveries and the findings that I had, sharing my experience, I paused for a second, I looked up to find her having set aside her tools and intently looking at me. And she proceeded to ask me to describe some of the experiences that I had with some of the sensory challenges. And as I was sharing more, she shared that when she was younger, her child was struggling quite a bit. She took a long pause. I thought they had grown out of it, but now I'm wondering if they're just masking.